Let's turn to another big story from this past week, and that's President Biden's sweeping executive order on competition. And yet another colorful daily dish that you wrote. You said it has the feel of an elementary school science fair with no theme and exhibits of widely varying quality. What are the highlights of this executive order from your perspective?
Well, I mean, the reason I said that is there's some things in there that are just like almost laughable to me. Like, I'm going to direct the Department of Health and Human Services to, in 45 days, come up with a plan to lower prescription drug prices and stop gouging. Like, we've only been at this for years. Like, what are they going to do in the next 45 days that they can do administratively without legislation? So, that I view as a relatively low quality executive order. There are some, I think, which are depressing, right? So there's a call for the FCC to reinstate the so-called net neutrality rules, the regulation of the internet under Title II of the Communications Act. That's troubling on the substance, because I don't think that's the right way to regulate the internet. It's also been true that every time they have tried to do something about regulating the internet, the courts have said they don't have the authority to do it. Nothing has changed on that front. And so you need Congress to pass new law that gives the FCC the authority to regulate the internet in a way that people want. And so it's kind of depressing that they would go back to this well one more time, knowing that it's in the end a dead end. And so we have that. We have some things that actually a lot of people think are important. There's been increasing attention across the ideological spectrum to the idea that occupational licensing is a barrier to entry and hurts our labor market dynamics. So, you need 2,000 hours to be a hair braider, or 1,000 hours to become a fortune teller. Isn't that really just kind of a way to stop people from competing with the hair braiders and the fortune tellers, and as a result raising their prices? And the answer is probably yes. So, tell the Federal Trade Commission to get rid of unnecessary occupational licensing. Similarly, get rid of non-compete clauses where I preclude you from going to do digital work for any other think tank for the next 5 years. When I sign you, I didn't do that. It was an oversight, but we could have done that. Evidently, a large fraction of the labor force is affected by non-compete contracts. I've heard numbers as high as 50%. So those seem like good ideas. There's a real question as whether the FTC has the authority again to do that. Most of these are state level licenses, so I don't know if much will come of it. But there's that. And then there's some things that I think are large and very troubling. And the biggest of those is the notion that they are going to, change the standards by which competition is judged, in particular mergers and acquisitions, and go away from a reliance on what's known as the consumer welfare standard. So you look at the proposed merger or acquisition, and you say, does this harm the consumers in the market? So you have to identify the market, identify the competitors, see what happens to the nature of the competition, see what happens to prices and qualities and varieties, and make a judgment. And so it's a very disciplined approach to thinking about those issues. Here, they're going to say, we don't need to do that. We can just look at sort of bad conduct, or you're big enough to be a monopoly, and so we want you to be smaller, and a bunch of sort of fairly arbitrary criteria that can lead to contradictory decisions across cases and uncertainty about how the world works. And worse, they're going to take those standards and look back at old mergers and acquisitions and perhaps unwind some that they think are inappropriate using the new criteria. I think that's a horrifically bad idea, to be honest about it. And it's the kind of thing that really chills the incentives in the private sector to put together efficient businesses and provide innovative new business models and products.